John Hook's Newsmaker starts now.
Thanks for joining us on Newsmaker. We begin with the opening of the new Arizona legislative session. Water, affordable housing, changing voting laws, all of that on the agenda. And there is some sharp disagreement already between the Democrat Governor Katie Hobbs and the Republicans who control both the House and Senate at the state capitol and actually increased their majorities in both houses with the last election. Senate President Warren Petersen joins me now with more. Great to see you.
Great to see you. Thanks for having me on.
What's the climate like down there in terms of everybody getting along and trying to work together? Is it a battle or is there common ground?
Well, you know, it's similar to what we've seen the last couple of years. We're with divided government, of course, but we have expanded our majorities. I like to focus on having a chamber that can agree to disagree in good decorum. So far, I think we've been able to accomplish that up to this point.
Do you think the governor is moderating heading into an election year next year? Do you feel like she's swinging maybe more middle? I'm thinking of issues like death penalty. There's a bunch of stuff out there. Do you feel like there's some movement there just for political reasons? Yeah,
well, I think she'll need to if she wants to be successful. It's too early in the session. She hasn't had anything put on her desk yet. I will tell you the last couple sessions, she talked about border security, said she would support it, but we put 7 bills on her desk. She vetoed those, so we put it to the ballot, and then the voters supported that, passed that initiative almost 2-1.
Right. That's 314?
Yes, the Border Security
314,
Act.
Right. Okay, a couple things I want to get to that we're facing in this state. What are we going to do about water? You've said there's plenty of water, and if the state gets out of the way and lets the home builders kind of do their own deals with farmers to manage this water that we have.
Well, what I've said is that we can conserve and grow like Arizona always has. When Katie Hobbs took office, she completely veered in a different direction on water policy, and Arizonans are now suffering because of that. So what we have always done is we have increased our housing supply, added businesses, grown our state dramatically, and used less water. That's good water policy, and that's what we could continue to do. We have 7.5 million people in Arizona. We are using less water than we used when we had 1.5 million. So
in the 1950s.
Yeah, so it's a good thing.
This is an amazing thing. Now, I want to underscore this because this is not, this is real. We are using less water right now with all the people we have than we used in 1950, in the 50s.
Yeah.
57 is the last marker. And the reason, I guess, for that is because we have traded ag land, which is heavy use water, and it's gone to residential, which actually is very low use.
That's correct. Yeah, ag land is 3 times as much water. And so this good policy that we have always done has actually made, it's a good thing that the governor back in the 1950s didn't put a moratorium on housing, because we would have stayed at 1.5 million people. But what we've actually been able to do is dramatically increase our population and yet actually use less water.
It's counterintuitive. You just can't believe that fact is true, but it's true.
It's absolutely true, because if you look at the pie chart of the water usages, housing is actually this small little sliver. The large portions are agricultural and industrial. And we actually have parts of the state where there's a surplus of water. There are other areas where you have a scarcity of water. Where we have this less water are called the active management areas. So this is just a common sense policy. We've put this on her desk. Unfortunately, she's vetoed this. But we take housing, you put it on to a farm, so you use 1/3 of the water. You get a 2/3 water saving. It heals that water base, and it makes the water basin sustainable, and yet you continue to grow. This is a solution that we have right now.
Okay, I've got to get your take on this.
Sure.
If in the intervening years, from the 1950s till now, we're using less water, and we've had CAP come online during that period.
Yeah.
How do we have a water crisis, and do we actually have one?
Yeah, so we have had droughts, but we are actually starting to sit on these years where we've had more water. In fact, SRP reported this morning, as far as their water goes, they have more than sufficient water for all of their uses. But we have gone through periods of droughts.
But that's happened time immemorial in Arizona.
Yeah, correct.
That's what wiped out the Hohokams.
Yeah. So But had we not done this good water policy, we would have, I guess, been in a much worse situation. The reality is, even with the droughts and everything, we do have a lot of options. Ag to urban is just one, but we also have water transfers. We have what's called the Harquahala Basin that has an incredible amount of water that is available to Arizona as a solution. So we have groundwater. So we do have lots of options.
And we've got a 100-year supply of groundwater, right?
Yes, there's a 100-year groundwater supply required just for housing, but that's not required for commercial, industrial, or agriculture.
Okay. Buckeye and Queen Creek, we ran into this in those areas where, you know, they would not issue building permits because they couldn't prove there was a 100-year water supply.
That's right. And but it's counterintuitive because if we do ag to urban in both of those areas, you actually use less water.
Do we have a water crisis?
Here's what I would say. We need to be wise. We need to be good stewards of water, but we need to have good water policy. And yes, we need to conserve water policy. But the policies that have been implemented by the governor are actually sending us in the wrong direction, and they're causing the prices of housing to skyrocket. It's reducing our supply.
Is that an anti-growth thing, or what is it?
Yeah, I mean, it is an anti-growth. You're stopping growth, which is, for the first time in the history of Arizona.
It doesn't look like it out there.
Well, it may not look like it, but for the first time in the history of Arizona, we're not meeting supply. And for the first time in the history of Arizona, we don't have affordable housing. We have always had affordable housing in Arizona, but this is the first time we don't have.
Are you saying that may be of our own making?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, government is the problem. I mean, look, I've been involved in this industry for over 25 years. I can tell you 25 years ago, when we had a situation like this with high demand, you could get housing in the ground, do the development, everything within 6 months. That same process today, 25 years later, takes a minimum of 4 years, in some cases as long as 16 to 20 years to get those projects approved. With 16, 20 years, you're not going to have affordable housing.
Okay, this idea to let duplexes, triplexes, townhomes in areas zoned for single-family homes, agreement with the governor last year on this whole deal, putting casitas on people's property so they can add housing units.
Yeah. Is
that a good idea?
Well,
I just wonder what's going to happen in neighborhoods if you have a proliferation of that stuff.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, what has separated the United States from the rest of the world and made us the most prosperous country in the entire world was property rights, being able to use your property the way that you wish. And so I mean, we have started to outlaw homes that, you know, I grew up in, my parents lived in, my grandparents lived in. You can't even build the homes, you know, me driving over here for this interview, there's homes that aren't even legal to build anymore. Why on earth are we making it illegal to build an affordable house? And if somebody wants to put a casita on their property that looks nice and it meets, you know, the designs, why would we stop somebody from building a casita?
Okay, yeah, I understand that. I just wonder in neighborhoods how this could impact traffic flow, parking, all kinds of ancillary things that we maybe haven't thought of.
Adding a casita or two to a neighborhood, I don't know how that's going to totally change the traffic.
All right, let's talk about elections. You have spearheaded the effort to try to streamline our elections to where we get results earlier. Part of this is cutting off early voting on the Friday before the Tuesday election. That, in other words, you couldn't start turning in early ballots any later than Friday. Is that the long and short of your bill?
I mean, that's one of the biggest points of the bill. Another, is that there's a drop-off of Friday before the election for your early ballot. People can still drop off their ballot early, but they would, at that point, they'd need to drop it at the recorder's office.
Because they have to show proof of who they are, and so that you don't have to go through signature verification, which delays the tabulation.
The biggest delay right now is that the number of ballots that get dropped off day of. So just like many other states, we would have a cutoff of Friday so that they can begin processing all of those ballots.
That's the Florida model?
Yes, that's the Florida model.
And it works quite well. They get results that night.
You don't hear anybody in Florida saying, hey, we need to have more time to drop off our ballot.
Okay, so the argument would be that, you know, the elections officials don't call elections. The news organizations do, predominantly the AP. Are we changing election rules just to try to appease people out in TV land who want results on election night.
Well, what I can tell you is my job as a policymaker is to put good policy forward that my constituents want. On this issue, I heard more on this issue than I have heard in the last 13 years as a lawmaker. We were dead last in the entire nation to deliver our electoral results. And I heard from person after person, Warren, we are the laughingstock of the nation. I mean, come on, we're in the modern era. We can absolutely deliver election results night of.
Let's talk about education funding. We are leaning more and more on the State Land Trust, and this is Prop 123, which ends this year. Can you just give me a quick explanation of how this land trust thing works and
Sure.
how we get money from it?
Yeah, absolutely. So we had taken a percentage annually from the State Land Trust, dedicated it to K12 education. This was passed by
That's
the
7% a year, right?
Yeah, this was passed by the voters 10 years ago. It's $300 million, about $300 million. And we have actually, with our budgeting and our surplus, we have now backfilled that. So even when that expires, that money will continue to be there. So the
It's growing.
Yeah, well, even what I'm saying is this: we are backfilling the Prop 123 money with general fund money. So that is not going to, there is not going to be a decrease in K-12 funding just because Prop 123 expires. What we're this would be additional funding on top of what 123 had. And what the Republicans are proposing, that's in contrast to the Democrats, is we want it to go to teacher pay. We want to take Arizona's teachers above the national average in teacher pay. This would do that. We also want to protect parental choice for how parents can decide how to educate their children. Those are the Democrats would like the money to go to administration and other things. We want it to go to the teachers and in the classroom. They don't want to protect school choice. We do. So those are that's the disagreement right now.
That's a disagreement.
That's the schism.
Okay. State Treasurer Kimberly Yee said withdrawing nearly 7% a year she thought was too aggressive. They should reduce the trust, and she favors 4 to 5% from the land trust.
Yeah.
I mean, she's a conservative Republican. Where's that disconnect?
No, we can. That's something we can discuss. And,
okay, but the governor wants it to go to 9%.
Right, and we've been talking about the legislature has been talking about 7. The proof is in the pudding. Over the last 10 years, it was 7%. Everyone said that would exhaust the fund. Actually, it grew beyond the 7%. So the 7% was sustainable. We've also, we're planning on putting a circuit breaker in there so that if it doesn't grow, it can, it will, we will make sure that the corpus remains whole.
Okay, finally, we've only got less than a minute now. This has to go to a vote. Would this be a special election to extend out 1, 2, 3?
It doesn't have to be. Like I said, we have protected 1, 2, 3. It's already budgeted. So last year when we did the budget, Prop 123, the $300 million is falling off, right? We backfilled that with the general fund.
Okay.
So we have already budgeted to continue funding the Prop 123 dollars.
If you can.
So this can be done in 2026, and it's an extra. So that's why I'm telling you, the Republican plan is to use it for teacher pay increases to take us above the national
Who would
average.
oppose that?
I don't think anybody.
I mean, isn't that where everybody seems to think the money should go, is to the teachers?
Not the Democrats, but that's what the Republicans believe.
They want it to go to all staff.
That's correct. Administration, other members.
Why would that be?
Well, you'd have to ask the Democrats. I don't know.
But you're here.
I can't speak for them. I can just tell you they disagree with us on this issue.
Okay. So. State Senate President Warren Petersen, appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on.
Stand tight. We'll be back in a moment on Newsmaker. And by the way, when we come back, the California fires, are there lessons to be learned for us here in Arizona? Back in a moment on Newsmaker. Welcome back. With the historic, horrific fires in California, questions about land management and fire prevention have come to the fore. And with so many communities backing up to wilderness areas, the possibility of fires causing catastrophic damage increases, and Arizona is not immune from this. Andy Mandel is a fire staff officer for Tano National Forest. Andy, thank you. I know you've worked fires in your career. It's great to have you on. Thank you, first of all.
You bet. Happy to be here.
Andy, just give me an overview in California. The conditions there, 90+ mile-an-hour Santa Ana winds, dried brush. They hadn't had rain in a while, even after 2 very wet winters. Conditions were ripe, and something that struck me, a fire manager down there said, at 10 miles an hour with winds were firefighters. At 40 miles an hour were spectators. At 60 miles an hour were windsocks. That stuck with me. I thought there's a sense that there's not much you can do when you have those conditions that dire.
And I would be, obviously I'm not in California, so I can't speak to specifics about those fires or those agencies' response. But I can see, from a view here, that they had some really extremely challenging conditions line up as to what you spoke to. With winds like that, fuels like that, those conditions make it very challenging to extinguish fires.
Do you think there are similarities to this and what happened in Maui with the Lahaina fires? I mean, they had issues as well, but again, when you've got those kinds of winds working downslope, my God, it just seems like, can you have enough firefighters to stop that?
Well, and again, I'm not there and I wasn't involved in the response, so I don't want to speak to specific fires. I can just speak to when we have extreme fire conditions, extreme fire weather, and dry fuels. It makes it very, very difficult to protect what we call values at risk, which is, communities, infrastructure, all the things that matter. When you get a fire under extreme conditions, that's an extreme challenge.
Lessons for Arizona. And let's talk about the current fire burning. You've got an update on that, and progress has been made, but getting resources on it was not easy, right?
The Horton Fire, we did have the Horton Fire, which started, I believe, December 14th. Yeah, that's a real challenging time of year to have a fire. Ideally, fire conditions aren't very extreme this time of year, which is not necessarily the case this year. However, we did successfully manage to stop that fire. We managed to work very well with our partners, cooperators, and resources from all over the place.
Andy, why did it burn so long? That has gone on for the better part of a month, over a month now. Why did that burn for so long? And was some of that, were you allowing some of it to burn to get rid of some areas that were really maybe a bigger problem, say in the summertime when temperatures are up around 100?
This wasn't a natural caused fire. By policy, we don't try to use fire for resource benefit on a human caused fire or a fire under investigation that wasn't started naturally. The challenge that that wasn't this. The challenge that we did face with this fire was it was off the face of the Mogollon Rim, which has got an unfortunate history of firefighter fatalities.
The Dude Fire. Yep, in 1990. I covered it.
It's extremely rough. It's extremely rugged. And a good portion of this fire was in an area on the rim that didn't have any fire history for over 100 years. So you had an incredible accumulation of fuels to add kind of to the complexities of that fire. So it was a full suppression fire where we wanted to put it out. We always look to do that. And the places that we have kind of the highest probability of success of being able to stop a fire while we protect those values at risk that I talked about: infrastructure, wildland, urban interface, wildlife, watershed, all power line infrastructure. This fire had all of those things.
Yeah. Let me ask you about California for a second, because unless I'm wrong, I think California has led the way actually in fire management in many respects. They were one of the first to really adopt defensible space, which we've really gotten aggressive with here in Arizona. How do you think we're doing in areas that interface with wooded areas or high volume areas with brush and tinder and understory and all of it?
A couple of years ago, the Forest Service came out with an initiative called the Wildfire Crisis Strategy, and it was based on trying to really focus on those high identified areas that we prioritize that really need help, really need protecting. So we have always done that even prior to this rollout of this plan, but over a long period of time in Arizona, we've done really well. Again, the Forest Service and working with our partners, getting projects funded, working towards getting communities towards Firewise, clearing brush, doing a lot of work around communities.
Yeah, we even do it. I mean, where I live in Scottsdale, we have Firewise, and we're in just a kind of a neighborhood, but they are all over this. The defensible space, clearing brush. When you said that you guys have identified areas that are potential, issues if a fire were to break out, can you tick off a few of those that we might know?
They're all important to maybe start where I need to, but those areas of focus, we have done an awful lot of work in and around the Petersen area. We've got projects like Fry and the San Carlos landscape that have been identified. Those are two of the fire sheds that an incredible amount of funding work has been accomplished. But all of it is critical. Your state partners have done an awful lot of work. We've worked together with them, trying to, and you see the fruits of that even here in Scottsdale.
Yeah.
A lot of the mitigations that have started to happen or continue to happen in and around communities.
I should point out in LA in 2022, LA County fire officials did more than 58,000 inspections to notify people if they needed to clear stuff. And if you don't do it, after a couple of go-arounds, you can be fined up to $2,000. Is it still the 30-foot defensible space zone? And then there's something in LA they call Zone 0, which is 5 feet from a structure, that's got to almost be barren. They really want that for ember protection. What do you think of those rules, and is that kind of what we're doing here?
There's the Firewise kind of standards, and obviously we're huge advocates for that. That goes into the construction of structures, the vegetation and landscaping in and around it. It's all critical, and it all makes a difference, not only for the protection of homes, but it is a huge game changer in terms of fire response and being successful, not only for firefighter safety, but being able to protect those things that matter.
This is a touchy area, but I want you to just give me your sense. When you look at the situation in California, are there places where we are building where we shouldn't be building?
I'm not fire management in California, and I haven't looked at any and everything over there. I can tell you that what we are challenged with is, like I mentioned, fire has been on the landscape forever. What's changed is we're nestled in the woods, where we didn't used to be, building communities and all those things. So that does make that more challenging because fire will be there. It's just a matter of how prepared we can be when it gets there.
Okay. Andy Mandel, we appreciate it. Fire Staff Officer for Tono National Forest. Thanks for your time.
Hey, you bet.
Good to see you, Andy. Appreciate it. We'll be back in a moment on Newsmaker. Thanks again, as always, for joining us on Newsmaker, and we will see you next week.